what I also want, programmatically speaking, is a smarter Siri, because Siri is the most used bot that I use every day, especially in the car. And it's the most idiotic bot that I use every day. So the combination of usage, which I use all the time, and the low utility is quite disturbing. And if they make advances there and Siri becomes smarter and more useful, that's an amazing advancement.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode. Industry insiders having frank debates about the latest tech, politics, and business news. Whether you're a founder, investor, or operator in a startup, you'll gain insights into how current events connect to broader themes and trends that impact your startup, your investments, and your day-to-day operational decisions. The conversation starts now.
Hey, I'm Chris Saad.
Hey, I'm Amir Shvat.
Hey, I'm Emil Michael.
Welcome to another episode of this week's Startup Podcast Reacts. On this week's show, we're going to discuss A16Z raising a huge fund. What does it mean for VC funding moving forward and the ecosystem in general? We're going to discuss the new electric Atlas humanoid robot. Why is it so creepy? And why is it still not good enough for our panel? We also discuss Apple Realm and how Apple is gearing up for something huge with Siri. Hear about it first here on the show. We're also going to discuss Meta's Llama 3 and how it's actually beating Gemini 1.5 Pro across some dimensions, and how open source is actually beating the proprietary models. What is going on? And then also OpenCRISPR. Will your children be part of a eugenics war? Stay tuned to find out. All this and more on this week's episode. Stay tuned.
This episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by Vanta. You might know that sinking feeling. You're about to land a big contract when they ask about compliance. SOC 2, ISO, PCI, Essential 8. You've just snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Not anymore. Vanta massively accelerates your compliance efforts and allows you to get those life-changing deals back on track. Don't wait until it's panic stations, though. Get started with Vanta today. They're offering 20% off their prices just for TSP listeners. Do yourself a favor. Hit pause, go to vanta.com/TSP, that's VANTA.com, to get that 20% off.
So our first topic today is about A16Z raising a crap load of money. If you haven't heard about A16Z, I don't know where you've been living for the last 10 or 20 years, but they are one of the top VC firms in the world, and certainly out of Silicon Valley. Amir, maybe you want to set this up, tell us the story. What did they raise? Why was it significant? And what should founders and investors listening take away from it?
So yeah, A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz raised $7.2 billion with a B with their fund. The kicker here is that they were planning to raise 6, and they got more money than they originally planned. And I think this is a new wave in funding, because up until the last 6 months, you've seen funds finding it hard to raise money. And I think this is a good initial trajectory. If you see Andreessen Horowitz starting to raise more money, you'll see more medium-sized funds raise more money, and then micro-sized funds raise more money. So at least for me, I'm optimistic that this is a new wave of investments in tech.
Yeah, we've been talking on the show for a long, long time, since the downturn, that this is not the end of Silicon Valley style venture scale companies, right? This is a downturn like many downturns before it, that there's a lot of dry powder on the sidelines. And as soon as, the macroeconomic climate shifts, things will thaw and so on. And so we've been seeing this come back thanks to OpenAI and the large language model trend and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, this is another data point in a long line of data points. And I think you're right, Amir. Shit rolls downhill, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
As the valuations in the stock market open up and expand, as the acquisitive nature of these big companies grows, valuations have room to grow, funds have room to grow, and everything grows underneath it. And this will be another big bull run.
My question to you guys is, do you think that we're going to see the same thing with exits? So this is a sign that we're going to see the top of the funnel, the investment funnel, with more money. But other than Reddit, I haven't seen a lot of exit recently. So do you think that we're going to start seeing more IPOs in this year?
I mean, I do. I think you have some really good companies queued up. Canva, Databricks, Ramp, that just raised sort of what seemed like a pre-IPO rounds. And those are all like companies that are performing top line and bottom line growth, like all the good stats, much better than I think Reddit's are. So I think the IPO market is still a little hampered by the interest rate situation, but hopefully later this year, early next year. I guess you're probably right that LPs in this new $7 billion fund are probably deciding to commit that much because they know or believe that some IPO money is coming on the other side from previous investments. But it's an extraordinary raise in a very difficult market, even for the best brand names in venture. Like Sequoia always be able to raise, and Andreessen Horowitz always be able to raise. But this is such an extraordinary amount that is a good optimistic sort of signal for our industry.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think in the last few episodes, I've been the pessimist on the call.
Oh, man. Oof.
In some ways, I've been the pessimist, but in some ways, I'm also like contradictory, the sad idealist, and people are not living up to my ideals. But, definitely about venture scale Silicon Valley style companies, I'm always going to be the optimist. And I feel like this is just, an inevitable additional data point that we were all expecting. And I think founders listening, investors listening, it's now even more clear than before that you need to be investing ahead of this curve. Now's a great time to be building companies. Now's a great time to be investing angel dollars. Now's a great time to be betting on this platform shift in large language models and AI. And so if there's one takeaway from this show, that's the one. All right, let's move quickly on to our other topics. The rest of the discussion is unsurprisingly going to be about a lot of AI news. We really should just rename the show to the AI Hour, but we have no choice. That is the exciting and breakthrough stuff that is going on. And frankly, it's what we want to talk about. So it's our show. We can do what we like. And the first bit of AI news is, of course, Atlas, the new Atlas from Boston Dynamics, the electric Atlas. Now, for those of you who don't know, Boston Dynamics has been doing this for how long now, guys? 20 years?
Long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, long time. They have been, one of the leaders in robotics, both four-legged robot dog style robotics as well as humanoid style robotics. What's maybe less known, and I've touched on this in previous episodes, is a lot of their big innovations in the early days especially were around hydraulics. These are like robots powered by liquid running around their systems. And it's a very particular kind of robot. It's very heavy. And the co-founder was very interested in this kind of robot. And he actually described them as like literally leaky. They leak on the ground. And so they're hard to manufacture. They're hard to put into everyday situations. And they're messy and all this kind of stuff. But what they started to do is move more into electronics with Spot and more real commercial applications instead of just R&D projects. And Spot was kind of the first main example of this. But Atlas, which is their humanoid robot, has been languishing in this kind of R&D hell. Like they get it to dance and they get it to do gymnastics, but like no one's really clear what the hell this thing is useful for. But they announced kind of retiring the old hydraulics Atlas, and they, within a few days, announced the all-new electric Atlas. And they announced it in the creepiest way possible.
Creepiest way. My God, the internet was so scary. Like Twitter was so scary for a while with that video.
Yeah, they got it to stand up from a weird, awkward
And like
position.
twist his head like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like, some scary recovery scene when, the bad guy knocks the robot down in the sci-fi dystopian movie and it gets back up again in the most threatening way possible. I don't know what their PR strategy is about that other than to get a lot of attention. I, for one, A, welcome our robot overlords, and B, welcome Boston Dynamics back into the game, right? Like it feels like they were falling behind, and I'm excited and happy for them to demonstrate that, no, we're here and we're here to play.
I don't know, man. I feel like there's a disadvantage to having started in humanoid robotics 15 years ago and like iterating on a platform that's just now electric, for example. It's a classic tech problem, right? Like, yes, you're early in the market, but then you're incrementally advancing, and now like a whole new robotics platforms are being built today that don't have that legacy. So I just wonder, is it a new page? This assets traded, SoftBank has been sold and moved, and like, I don't know.
No, I agree with you. That tends to be the problem of, classically known as innovator's dilemma, but I don't think this is innovator's dilemma so much as academic's dilemma, where a company has this kind of academic background, this deep research background that may have actually been in the wrong trajectory. And their DNA is more about this deep tech thing rather than this rapid commercialization thing. So I think in terms of the cognitive debt, their muscle memory debt is real. I don't know about their technical debt, though, because the Electric Atlas looks like a fresh start. And it looks like they were bold enough and clear-eyed enough to throw out the old stuff and go, hey, we have a new opportunity here, and here's what it looks like. And so that bodes well for them.
My problem is that I'm tired of fancy demos. I want to see something that is useful and move out from the demo with the turning of the head and all the creepy movement into something that is useful. Give me one robot that is slightly useful, that does like laundry folding or something like that, and I'll be super happy. And all these videos are nice and inspirational, but I want to move from the inspirational to the utilitarian set of robots.
I think it's Nat Friedman, who's like a very well-respected tech investor and tech guy. He tweeted, "I just want a robot that quietly picks up leaves at night on my property so you don't have leaf blowers."
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's like, of course, the backlash is like, oh, of course a tech bro would want that, or like hilarious.
Give me something that is useful. Yeah.
Well, look, we have robots that clean pools, robots that clean your floor in your house. I agree with you on the practicality piece, but it's so sexy. The humanoid things are just like imagining, like this figure
Emil,
company.
We're now off track now, talking about how sexy these robots are.
Sexy in terms of like how crazy it is to see something move like a human.
I'm just teasing. Yeah, you've gone red.
But I mean, how mind-blowing it is to see.
Yeah.
To see.
Yeah. Anthropomorphizing, right?
Yeah.
No, totally. But to be fair to these guys, though, there is a robot demo that I've seen, humanoid robot demo that I've seen folding laundry. They described it as soft body manipulation. I think this was a Chinese robot, actually. I can't immediately find it on Google. But then the figure 1 demo shows an OpenAI powered example where he says, hey, what's in front of you? And it says dishes and a drying rack and you standing there. And he talks about give me the apple or give me something to eat. And it gives him an apple because that's the only thing that's edible on the table. And it picks up garbage, it stacks things. So, they're trying to demonstrate usefulness and utility. But you're right, Amir. I would love to see one of these things survive a busy household with kids running around, pushing on the thing, water splashing everywhere, mom and dad yelling at each other, and have it actually just, do the dishes.
Exactly. I want a shitty version of that at my home so I can complain and make it better rather than seeing a very well-controlled demo where you control all the inputs and outputs. I want to experience this. Like I have the ring, I have the watch, I have all the wearable things, and I'm trying. Some of them it's really crappy some of the time, but actually hitting the market is important here, I think.
And, Figure is saying they want to hit the market in the next 6 months. So we'll see how that goes.
That'll be great.
But you're right. This isn't real until it's real, and we'll see how far away we are from that.
Let me also say, last word on Boston Dynamics, in my view, is like this connection to foundation models, I think has actually opened my eyes to what the next generation of robotics will be. And I think we talked about a little bit of this last week, the fact that you have Nest cams that have been recording human movement and you yelling at your wife, it sounds like Chris, and kids screaming or her yelling at you. And
I've revealed too much about my personal life on this show.
Sounds like a little bit. And the connection to those things where Boston Dynamics has no connection to that thing. It's like built with different inputs. And it might not be true, but it also could be true that there's so much more training data for robots that come from a foundation model than Boston Dynamics has ever gotten in any other way.
Very true. Yeah, the advantage, the distribution advantage, the data advantage that we talked about in the last episode that Google has, that Apple has, is pretty extraordinary. It's pretty extraordinary. So we'll see how it plays out. Speaking of Apple, actually, our next topic is about Apple's Realm, reference resolution as language modeling. Realm, R-E-A-L-M. From ZDNet or ZDNet, depending on your accent, it's their on-device AI system. It's intended, or it could, let Siri remember your conversation history, understand what's on your iPhone screen, be aware of surrounding activities, such as recognizing the music playing in the background. It's intended to be a conversational AI system with a novel approach to improving reference resolution, they say. And so it sounds like this is their white paper and their research into a device side, a client side, large language model rooted in what they're calling reference resolution, which to me sounds like just multimodal, but I'm not really clear on what the reference resolution is specifically. But it's certainly going to be one of the things in the mix for Apple. Emil, you and I have talked a lot about the Apple consumer advantage that's being undervalued and underestimated. But Amir, I wonder how you're thinking about Apple, AI, iPhone, and what this Realm thing tells you.
So I look at it from a programmatic perspective. First of all, I think multimodal is the future of AI, at least for this year, like connecting multiple senses. Up until now, we had AI using a single sense, and we've started seeing some demos of multi-sense. but I want to see more live multi-sense AI coming. So if Apple is doing that, that's amazing. So I want my AI to listen to me, to see me, to use all the senses. And there's tons of sensors on the phone and on the computer that could be used. So that's great. What I also want, programmatically speaking, is a smarter Siri, because Siri is the most used bot that I use every day, especially in the car. And it's the most idiotic bot that I use every day. So the combination of usage, which I use all the time, and the low utility is quite disturbing. And if they make advances there and Siri becomes smarter and more useful, that's an amazing advancement.
I mean, there's no way Siri doesn't become, or the concept of the assistant on your phone doesn't become more smart and useful. If I were Apple, like, it's the obvious innovation that didn't quite fulfill its promise that now has to fulfill its promise. They have to invest in that. My guess is in this big summer announcement that they're going to have, you'll have some new thing. It won't be a marginal improvement in Siri. It'll just be a new thing.
That'll be amazing.
That's my guess.
One of my friends, actually, who maybe you guys are acquainted with, Josh Ellman. He's over at Apple now. He was at LinkedIn. He was at Twitter. He was at Facebook. He's been at all the important companies at all the important moments.
He's a great guy.
He's a really great guy, real sweetheart. Obviously, working at Apple can't tell me anything about anything of what he's working on. I have a sneaky suspicion he's working on AI stuff. And I, through no evidence or information from him, have a sneaky suspicion it's Siri related. And if he is even in the mix there, I think they're in good hands just in terms of product thinking and clarity of thinking. And yeah, I agree with you, Emil. Like, this feels like as inevitable as gravity. If they haven't pivoted a significant portion of their resources and product investment and developer tooling around Siri and their agents and plugging it into every kit that they have, health kit and AR kit and whatever kit, then that would be a pretty catastrophic mistake and a pretty obvious one. And so, yeah, Realm is yet another little bit of evidence that Apple is taking this seriously, combined with all the companies they're buying or have bought in the space, combined with their rumored conversations with Gemini, combined with the assumptions and rumors about their next conference. I think Apple is set to hopefully come out swinging, and I think the stock price is undervalued for that reason. Hopefully they don't stumble and fumble the ball like Google did with Gemini.
The other interesting thing I've been thinking about is you use your Siri to manage your personal life, but you may end up using your desktop and OpenAI to write code or do things that are desktop-y. And you can imagine foundation models sort of optimizing for either path based on not only the data, but like the use cases around them. And Apple owns the mobile phone use case. Yes, Samsung, sure. But from a market share standpoint, usefulness to your life, the amount of time we spend on our mobile phones versus our desktops, the ratio is extraordinarily different. But maybe our work life, sure, you're coding, you're writing emails, and so I don't know. I think Apple's underestimated here.
Just to add to that, I think like connecting your personal life to your business life should become something that Apple should strive towards. Like, I want to tell Siri to do something in my calendar. I want to tell Siri to send a message in Slack. And if they connect Siri to all these tools on your business, or even use an AI that you have on your Salesforce to connect to Siri, then you'll have a much more useful tool in your hand.
On the desktop side, I think Apple has an opportunity to bring Siri to macOS in a way that has been irrelevant before. Like, it's on macOS, but not in any meaningful way. And so I think for Siri to succeed, let's call it next-gen Siri, I think it has to be cross-device and live on the desktop. Of course, what you're talking about really, Emil, is productivity on the desktop. So that's, I think, Google and Microsoft's game to lose. And I think they're going to have a huge advantage there. On the phone, sure, Siri, Google Assistant, right? I'm still also very bullish on the new form factor of glasses. I think Meta's the only one playing here. And I think, again, if I was at Apple, I would be thinking very serious about headphones, and I'd be thinking very seriously about glasses. It's Apple Vision Glass or Apple Vision Light. That is a huge opportunity, huge opportunity. And I think one of the killer form factors in this next decade.
I think Apple Vision Pro gets a little too much hate. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's like whatever, but some of the things it does is amazing, like follows your iris, and like it does some like pretty amazing technical hardware/software stuff. And so if you imagine it 3 versions out, you start to think like, well, like, yes, they have to invest in it and they will, but like, I think that's a smarter bet for them than building a car.
I think the Meta strategy is a really clever one, which is they're coming from the top down, like immersion and big thing and productivity and gaming, but they're also coming from the bottom up, which is this lightweight Ray-Ban glasses. Yeah. And they're kind of going to meet somewhere in the middle, or there'll be this spectrum of use cases, right? And I think when you add LLMs to the glasses, which Meta has done, it reduces the pressure applied to the need to display in the glasses to solve the waveguide visual problem. It reduces the need, the pressure, the anxiety around that, because the experience could become entirely auditory. And so I think you could get augmented reality, but augmented through audio instead of video. This multi-modal agent could go, hey, the thing you're looking at is this thing. Hey, that thing you're about to do, watch out. Hey, Siri, what is this thing in front of me? Oh, it's this. And you can have the world described to you instead of painted on pixels, because that's really, really hard, right? To stick all that waveguide shit in the glasses is hard. It's not hard to produce some sound into your ear. And I think that's the next generation of AR, is audio AR powered by LLMs.
This reminds me, when I was at Google, they brought in Vint Cerf, which is one of the forefathers of the internet. And he talked about the first cellular phone, and he said that it looked like a brick and had 15 minutes of battery power, but it was okay because it was so heavy you couldn't hold it for more than 15 minutes. So it was a great fit for the use case. I think what we're looking when we look at vision and all these, we're looking at the worst version of these products ever. And I think we're going to make a lot of advancements here. And I think we're going to solve the multimodal for humans. Maybe it's going to be something that you put on your eye. Maybe it's going to be something that connects in a different way. Maybe, to Chris's point, it's going to be more auditory. But I think we're going to solve the multi-connection between software and humans. And I think, connecting back to the beginning of the conversation, if Siri becomes a much more useful multi-aspect of your life, Siri or any other AI, that'll be extremely useful for us.
Yeah, I think there's some combination there with the headphones, the glasses, and maybe the supercomputer in your pocket being the phone. There's a lot there, a lot. And the reason I'm more bullish on the glasses, or rather equally bullish on the glasses, is because you need that heads-up camera. Then it goes from just auditory to multimodal. And I think once you combine what's on your phone, what's in front of you, and your voice, you don't need a display for 80% of the use cases that you've historically needed a display. And I think that's really very, very exciting.
You know what's ironic, just a little bit of internet history for people, or tech history, is that Evan Spiegel at Snapchat was one of the first guys to say, like, we're a camera company, and he had this like glasses thing, and everyone was like, ha, 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 ha. Like, how crazy is that? And Google Glass too, I guess. But we're now in like the Rev 2 sort of more reality of this working and being important.
Yeah, over at Snapchat, they were very prescient and early to this. I do think this is actually worth going into a little bit for our listeners. I have this mental model, and I'm sure people in LA are going to be unhappy with this characterization. But I think what Snapchat did and does versus what Meta's doing is a great case study of LA versus San Francisco tech. Like, Snapchat's insight is that, like, they're a camera company. They did some glasses with a camera in it, and Snapchat is this interesting thing, but it's fairly trivial and casual and fun. That's kind of very LA. It's very content. It's very casual. It's very point solution. In my mind, like, MySpace before Facebook was a very LA type solution, right? It's all about the entertainment and the fun. And what Facebook did is they added a Silicon Valley platform bent to this. It's like, this is a platform. It's not a product. Right? This is a thing we're going to invest in over multiple iterations. It's going to have an API. It's going to plug into Messenger. It's going to plug into sharing. And we're going to build this out as an ecosystem of products with a long-lived roadmap and a real multimodal, multi-environment vision. I'm sure LA tech people are going to hate me for saying this, but really it's the difference between platform thinking and more content, entertainment, casual engagement thinking. And obviously, I'm very bullish on what Mark's doing with the glasses versus where Evan was able to take it with Snapchat.
I want to disagree or push back a little bit here. I don't see it as LA versus Valley. I see it more as a small startup versus big company mentality. Like, you have the small startup and they're all about like creation and experience. And then you have the big, like, I think Microsoft, which is a Seattle base, would take the same platform approach. I think big companies always take the platform approach, and small companies find it hard to create platforms because they're not used to it. The DNA is not a platform DNA. And I think the mental model that I have is like waves created by the small companies. And then the big waves are cut by the big companies, and they turn that innovation into a platform. So they let the small players play, prove out what works and what doesn't. And once the things work, they turn it into a platform capability. And that's how they win.
Yeah, I think that's generally true. I think the observation that I would make about Facebook, though, if you think about Facebook versus MySpace, which is a little bit, or had aspects of LA versus Silicon Valley, right? That's the story that proves the point, which is that they both were born from social networking and this kind of casual interaction. But Facebook took it into a platform, took it into a serious game, and they became a big company around that. And we know what happened with MySpace, right? So I think the journey to big company is to think of yourself, how do you become from a point to a line to a square to a cube? How do you go from being an individual product to being a platform? And I think Facebook had the vision to make that leap. Now, you could argue that's not a Silicon Valley thing, it's a Mark Zuckerberg thing, but I think it's born out of that environment, that thinking, that approach. I admire it, let's say that.
This episode of the Startup Podcast is brought to you by Vanta. The team at Vanta are passionate about helping you secure your business. By vastly cutting down on the time to get compliant with frameworks like ISO 27001, SOC 2, and Essential 8, Vanta lets you close deals, sleep better at night, and get back to building your product. Help yourself and help the podcast by going to vanta.com/TSP for an exclusive 20% off deal.
Let's talk about our next topic. Actually, speaking of Meta and Facebook, they just released Llama 3 as open source. And this thing is crazy. It is beating Gemini 1.5 Pro on some benchmarks, which is just crazy for an open source model, all right? And crazy given that 1.5 Pro is just come out and just starting to make it into the wild. And this kind of arms race and this one-upsmanship and now this vacillating between proprietary models and open models is such an exciting game of both innovation for developers to take advantage of, but also a little bit of a scary, arms race when you think about AI safety and so on. And so did you guys see this Llama 3 announcement? It was quite casual by Mark Zuckerberg in terms of the recording and the way he did it, but it was also quite important in terms of what they released.
First of all, I think he's turning casual, which is not bad. He's becoming less of a stiff person and becoming more a casual person, which I really like. But what I more liked was that he talked about the suckiness of the mobile world. And he said that in the mobile world, you have to adhere to either Android or to iOS guidelines. So basically, you have two companies that own you. It's either Google or Apple that own the platform that you're innovating on. And he said that he doesn't want that for AI. That's why he's going to the open source path. And if you look at it, that's true. Like if you are building something for mobile, you need to adhere to two set of rules, the Google rules and the Apple rules. Maybe Samsung if you're going on that route. But there's not a lot of ability to innovate in the open. There's a lot of openness that you can take advantage of. And I think that's an exciting thing for me. Like if we have a true open source alternative to the closed platforms for the next wave of innovation, I think that'll be for developers a great news.
I mean, it's also a great policy move. Like there's a lot of attributes to the move, and anyone who's ever underestimated Mark Zuckerberg has lost money. He's just one of those guys who is just going to win. It was just brilliant. Like I thought a brilliant move on this. And then the other brilliant thing is that it's open source and free up to this market cap or up to to make sure that he's letting the small guys get advantage of it. And then the big guys have to negotiate with him for something. And then he has all these data centers built. I mean, he's got so many, just brilliant. And then remember, wasn't a year ago, maybe a year and a half, people were calling this company dead because of their investment in the metaverse and what a ridiculous waste of money and time it was. Imagine that. Crazy.
Never bet against Mark Zuckerberg. Never. And I think his arguments about open versus proprietary, it's a little bit rich coming from the guy who ran the most proprietary closed social network possible. We were pushing on Facebook hard with this consortium around open standards and open data, and they were hiding behind privacy and concerns about usage of the data and so on. That cycle, he didn't need to be the open guy. He needed to be the proprietary guy. This cycle, he's half a step behind and he needs to be the open guy. And it's funny to see him be about open protocols with threads and open source with AI.
But that's okay. I think that's okay, right? You have
It's perfectly
Microsoft
fine.
went through the same cycle, right? Microsoft hated open source When I was at Microsoft, you couldn't walk and say open source. They would just fire you on the spot. And now people walk with like penguin shirts and stuff like that in the Microsoft office. So I think that's okay for a company to mature into understanding openness is great.
I'm not taking anything away from it. I just think it's funny. I just think it's funny that when you're the winner, you can just take everything, tax everyone, control the whole game. When you're half a step behind or the loser, you need to build a consortium and you need to build a narrative and, and convince and cajole and embarrass your competition. That's okay. That's business strategy and technology strategy and platform strategy, and more power to him. I love watching him adapt and learn, both on the business strategy and technology strategy and product strategy side, and also on the personal side. Like, I've long felt like it's quite, at best, rude, at worst, I don't know what the word is, pejorative and bigoted to be, making fun of him. Clearly, he's on a spectrum and he's got a certain affect. And I think people making fun of that are quite rude, actually. And, I think even his ability, I was in one of his first interviews with Sarah Lacey, where they both shat the bed, actually. The narrative was that he was being awkward, but actually Sarah Lacey was being weird. And I was in the room at South by Southwest, and the whole thing was all about how weird he was and how sweaty he was and all this sort of stuff. He's gone from that and being a kid to being a very mature and very effective public speaker, very well media trained, and handling his very real disadvantages with his affect. And I think it's extremely admirable, everything he's done. And I think the criticism is often unfair, really unfair.
It's a little tangential, but man, like you read Kara Swisher, these people, like all these tech guys, they're terrible people. And you're like, well, I mean, they're adaptable, resilient.
Yes.
Like they're living in a capitalist world and they're adjusting accordingly and they're employing a lot of people. I mean, it does take a little bit of weirdness to build something so spectacular. It just doesn't happen to every person. You're like, oh, I'm going to go build a Facebook. So I feel like these people are national treasures. They're imperfect, but there's a reason why there's like $7 trillion of market cap in like 10 square miles in the Bay Area with these people. So I agree that we ought to celebrate it, but the press is done with these kind of people. They're done.
I'm on record a couple of times on this podcast, and I'll speak only for myself, not for you guys. I find Kara Swisher to be extremely annoying. I think she's value-free, she's snarky, she's cynical. She's the poster person for the man in the arena or the woman in the arena poem, where she just lobs bombs at people who are working really hard to build something of value. She doesn't even have any insights, like any real observations. And she gets on all these mainstream shows with her lame sunglasses and just says, drops names like, oh yeah, I know him and I hung out with him and I know him personally. And okay, but what's your observation, Kara? Like, what value are you adding to the conversation? Anyway, I'm speaking for myself here. I find her enormously frustrating.
Not to belabor this subject, but I think she was on the Bill Maher show. And Bill Maher has become like an interesting sort of sign of the times where politically he's like, I'm just saying the world's just changed around me. So
yes,
interviewing her, and it was the day after Neuralink had cured this patient and allowed him to be able to speak and see or something. And he's like, well, about Elon Musk did this, like he literally did a brain implant that cured someone of this debilitating disease. She's like, yeah, but I like that part of Elon. I just don't like the jerk part of Elon. You're like, I mean, the kind of like, what? I think what Zuckerberg is learning from PR perspective is like, just be what the PR people want to see, do judo and do cool, like barbecue and do things that like make you seem nice. And then whatever you have to do with your company, just like do it in the shadows.
The best quote I heard about this was from one of my founders. He said, like, we all think in the concept of the half empty glass and the half full glass.
Yes.
But there's a few people that want to make more glasses or to fill the glass. So like actually creating change. And that's a very small minority of humanity and we should cherish them. So I think that that's the key with those people. They're weird because they don't look at the state. They look at the future state in their mind and they actually work to create it. And that's amazing. That's magic.
I like the glass half empty metaphor because my perspective on that actually is the glass is always full. It's just about the ratio of water to air. Right? Yep. And so people say to me, you're very optimistic about a lot of stuff. I'm like, I'm not optimistic. I'm realistic. The glass is full. And it's just, you have to understand what its constituent parts are. And the fact, as you said, Amir, that you can go grab a bloody bottle of water and pour some in You meet a lot of people who are
Exactly.
thermometers who will just tell you the temperature of the room. And what you really need to be is a space heater and change the temperature of the room. This is the special power and talent of Silicon Valley style thinking in general, but obviously some of these leaders who are the most impactful and effective at this. All right, our last and perhaps most mind-blowing topic actually is OpenCRISPR, which is the first, as far as I know, the first AI applied to DNA editing, which is really cool. The model is able to generate millions of diverse CRISPR-like proteins which didn't exist in nature, and they're open sourcing it. And so this is like really interesting. As this person I was reading on LinkedIn said, many of the AI applications are really going from like 1 to N. You know, how do we do more copywriting? How do we do more productivity? This is really 0 to 1. This is a new way of generating new DNA and affecting people's diseases and their functionality of their bodies. And so this is the next generation, guys, right? This is after all of the co-pilots and robots. This is about how do we invent new science? How do we invent new biology? How do we invent new power generation? This is the exponential curve that we're really on. And, you know, while this has gone a little under the radar, I think this is the thing that's going to really change society as we know it. Have you guys heard about this? What are your thoughts about it?
I'm very bullish on healthcare AI. I've invested in a few companies that do things from cell therapy to other applications of AI in healthcare. You need to understand that this could potentially be a double-edged sword, right? The same tool that could be used for medicine could be used for generating viruses. So you need to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. And also you need to look at other aspects of how can AI help us. For example, material generation is something that I'm very excited about. I think our generation have seen the rise of plastic in the world. There could be tons of new material that could improve our life. So I'm looking at it from like, this is amazing, but this is also a big hammer. It could be used for amazing things and could be used for devastating things.
Yeah, I mean, so can like everything, your phone could be used to call on a bomb threat, you know, like,
Yeah,
like, so
for sure.
I don't disagree that every advancement has its risk, but man, the notion of having an AI that understands all of the history of humanity and can like use that to develop medicines or changes in material science and these things from a computational standpoint that was never done before with as much data is super exciting. And I think that's a little bit of the untold story. We talk about like, oh, well, consumer apps are going to work on OpenAI. Like, forget those. Like, what about pharma using foundation models to truly develop things that are specific to us as individuals and our own gene pool? And like, wow, that's going to be a thing.
It could be that our kids, our grandkids are going to be making fun of us for like taking a generic medicine that is not fine-tuned to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Right.
of course, we've covered some of the downside risks of these LLMs before. The current applications, there's risks around information warfare, disinformation, algorithms amplifying the wrong kind of extremist content. With the gene editing, of course, Amir, you're right, you could create viruses. I'm equally concerned about the increasing disparity between rich and poor, right? If you can afford gene editing for your children, and now all of a sudden the rich are becoming healthier, taller, stronger, that's interesting and dangerous and concerning. And then you may have this at a country level where countries are investing in up-leveling their soldiers or their population versus another country. You literally could end up in a eugenics war, right? Like to quote Star Trek. That is, I think, a non-zero, non-fantastical concern. This is not like science fiction. This is real, and it's very concerning. But I tend to agree with you, Emil, in the long term, like we want to be optimistic. The glass is full, right? And so we got to mitigate the downsides and optimize for the upsides. And I, for one, welcome our robot overlords and our superior genetic overlords, humans.
I mean, the future happens whether you want to participate in it or not. Like, you know, we don't do it, the Chinese will do it. So the best you could do is advance fast enough and cover your flank. You know, smaller and smaller amounts of people could do bigger and bigger things. And there's asymmetry that increases when you as a programmer could do something so big to the world. And that started with the computer age, and it started with the chemical age. Like people create a bomb that like, did this thing and hide it here. And that's just increasing. But there's no answer to it except to be faster, better at it and understand the risks and try to cover your flank and know that there's going to be issues.
Yeah, I mean, the definition almost of a tool is something that gives a human being leverage to amplify their effect in the world. And we are building better and better tools that amplify our effect in the world more and more, turning each of us into superhumans. And so human nature at maximum amplification can create maximum productivity or destruction. As the saying goes, I don't know what World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah.
That's Einstein.
Oh, Einstein, there you go. And also this relates to the Fermi paradox, of course, as well. Like, where are all the aliens? Maybe they just blew themselves up. And so this is a serious concern. Are we going to get through the great filter or not? And that gives me pause. It tests my optimism, but
the question I asked for the Doomerists is like, give me a better option. What is the alternative?
Oh, there is no better option. This is the only way.
Right. So if the alternative is like, well, let's just slow down, you're like, that's not an option. So
it's
like,
nonsense, yeah.
Yeah. So that creates a non-discussion. You want to have a discussion? Let's have a discussion about like, this is going in an accelerated place. Let's talk about what to do with that. Not, hey, decelerate, stop. Doesn't work.
Yeah, you're right. It's like you were going too fast. There is no brake.
Yeah.
So now you need better steering. You need better airbags. Yeah, that's crazy. All right, guys. Well, that's our show. Amir, how can people find you on the internet?
Oh, I'm at Ashvat at Twitter. Also at Blue Sky. Also on LinkedIn as Amir Shavat.
Awesome. And Emil, if people wanted to follow up with you, how can they find you?
I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Emil Michael. I miss Yaniv. Yaniv's like, oh, X, Twitter, nah.
It's so weird that you can tell our like political allegiances from how we describe Twitter. It's so funny. You can find me on Twitter, but I don't tweet because it's a garbage cesspool at the moment. You can find me across the internet at Chris Sard on all social media, and most especially at chrissard.com and chrissard.com/newsletter, where I control my own distribution and my own brand. All right, guys, and don't forget, if you've been listening to the show for a few episodes and gotten value, if you like hearing from Amir, Emil, Yanev, myself, and others, please honor the Startup Podcast Pact, which asks you to please share the show on your favorite social network, rate us and review us in your favorite podcasting app, and tell your friends. It helps us grow the show and helps us help more founders like you. All right, guys, great as always. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you guys.
All right, bye-bye.
This episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta helps businesses get and stay compliant by automating up to 90% of the work for the most in-demand compliance frameworks. With over 200 integrations, you can easily monitor and secure the tools your business relies on. Head to vanta.com/TSP for 20% off their incredible offering and start unlocking extra revenue today.
All right, I'll do the intro now, but Amir, if you just leave your tab open until the upload's complete, and then we're all good to go. And thank you for joining in and helping us out.
Of course. This is awesome.
Are you enjoying it?
Fun. Yes, this is awesome. I love conversation. I love you. And Emil is awesome, so I'm super happy to do this.
Emil, actually, I said to him, like, hey, you enjoying this? You want to do this? He's like, dude, I would do this even if no one was listening. He's like, I love the ability to just, like, talk about these things once a week and you know, ideate and stuff. And I feel the same way, because I never thought that that's what this would be, but I don't have an opportunity to have some of these conversations usually. So it's fun to have an excuse to get together weekly and do it.
Awesome. Cool. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.